Hello, David Clarke here from DVC Training, and I'm going to give you a quick guide on how to set up Edius for the first time. So when you've bought Edius, you'll be given a serial number and you'll be given a download link, and you'll end up with a file sitting here ready for you to run. So obviously what you do is you double click on that and then just run and install Edius. Obviously you just tick the relevant boxes and then let it install, which will take a few minutes. I always let all programs install to the folders that they really want to go into. So basically I just click next, next and next, and off it goes and installs the program. Once Edius is installed, it's still got to install Mink, which is the cataloguing program that comes with it. So again, let it do that. And once it's finished, you should have two shortcuts on your desktop. Now you might find that when you've installed Edius, your icons look a bit like this, as opposed to the green icons that you saw a minute ago. This is all changed by the resolution of your screen. So my screen here is actually set to scaling at 125%, and if you do that, you get these kind of icons. Set to 100% and 1920 by 1080, you get green ones. So don't panic if they look different. It's normal that they look different if you've got a higher resolution screen. Normally I'd restart at this point, because I normally like to restart after I put in any major program. And then after that, the next thing to do is to start up Edius. So I'll just click on the Edius 9 icon. And the first thing it asks you for is your serial number. Obviously you'll have this from when you bought Edius. You enter the serial number and you click register. It'll then go online and try and activate Edius. Now, if you don't have an internet connection, you can choose an offline option if you've got the workgroup version. But I'm not going to go through that here because it's just basically a lot easier to plug your machine into the internet and then click the register button. The other thing it will ask you for is an Edius ID. Now you can see here I'm using Edius 9 workgroup. So having put the serial number in and activated it, it goes into Edius straight away. If you're using Edius 9 Pro, it won't start Edius straight away. It'll immediately ask you to enter an Edius ID. You can't use Edius Pro without having an Edius ID. You can use Edius Workgroup without having an Edius ID. That's why if you've got Edius Workgroup, it'll give you the option of making an Edius ID and using it, but you don't have to. Whereas with Edius Pro, you have to. With Edius Pro, you have to go on the internet once a month to actually keep the program going. Now, if you miss a month, it's okay. You just start your machine up again, and it'll activate the next time you're on the internet. But it does have to check occasionally to make sure you've got a valid license. That's one of the major differences between the Pro version and the Workgroup version. Now obviously if you don't want your machine to go on the internet, you have to buy the Workgroup version. If you've got the Workgroup version, you don't have to have an Edius ID, but it's still a good idea to do it, because your Edius ID will also store your serial number for Edius, and your serial number is one of the most important things. If you lose everything else about Edius, you can always download the software again and reactivate it, provided you've got your serial number. So if you make an Edius ID, it'll store it for you. You've always got somewhere online where you can go and get it if you've lost it. Like I say, with the Pro version, you have to make up an Edius ID, and then it'll let you get on to the next step. With the Workgroup version, I can just click on this button and ignore the Edius ID and get straight into working with Edius, and I never have to connect the machine to the internet again. Next thing, you get to the standard Edius opening dialog box. At the top you have a user profile. It sets one up for you automatically. Now you might change it later on, but you can completely ignore that. It'll have a list of previous projects here if you've done any, which of course you won't have done. So really all you're going to do is click on the new project button to start a new project. And then it presents you with this wizard. When you start a project, you need to set the project settings. Edius needs to know whether it's doing high definition, standard definition, or whatever. And you're setting what you're aiming is the output format. If you're going to make a DVD, you'll probably use standard definition. If you're going to make a Blu-ray or an MP4 file, probably high definition. You've only just installed Edius, so it hasn't got any settings, so you've got to set some up. This wizard is meant to help you create presets that you think you're going to use all the time. If you get it wrong, you can always change them later on, and you can run this wizard later on, and you can make other settings later on, so nothing's set in stone. What you do really is you look at this and say, well, I'm definitely going to do some standard definition, I'm going to do some high definition, and I'm going to do some 4K. So yep, I want settings for all that lot. Now I'm in the UK, so I probably want to do 50i, which is sort of the standard thing you'd use for a television. I want to do 50p because I've got some cameras that film in that, and I also want to do 25p. But I don't really want to do any of the others. Next question, do you want to work in 8-bit or 10-bit colour? I could go into great length about what the bit depth means, but basically 10-bit colour will give you better results generally, but it'll be a bit more processor intensive. Now, since I'm using the latest Coffee Lake computer here, I'm going to choose 10-bit anyway because my computer can cope with it. Of course, I do have the option of dropping it down later if I want to. And the final question, how many audio channels do you want in your project? This isn't the number of tracks you have on the timeline. This is when you make the final file, how many audio channels has it got? And generally you'll want 2 because that's stereo. You might want 4 if you're producing something with 4 different audio channels for archiving maybe. You could have any of these. I mean, anything up to 64 channels if you want to. I'm just going to click 2 channels and then click next. And then it gives you a list of all the possible presets that you could have. So for 4K, I've actually got some full 4K settings and some quad full HD setting. 3840 2160 is the standard 4K size for television. 4096 is more like the size you'd use if you're going off to a cinema. Now I don't really need the 4096, so I'm going to untick it so it doesn't make one of those. I'm going to do the same with the 25p one. Because you remember I said, well, let's make 50p presets and 50i presets and 25p presets. So it's giving me the option here to do 50p or 25p in 4K. Doesn't give me the option to do 50i or interlace because you don't do interlace 4K. But I'm saying, no, I want a 50p quad full HD and I want 25p quad full HD, but I don't want the other two. On the high definition, yep, I definitely want a 50i 1920 and I want a 50p 1920. Don't really want a 1441 because that's the size of HDV and I don't do that anymore. Yep, quite like a 1280 by 720 50p. Yep, like a 25p 1980. I'd like a 25p one of those, and yep, I'd like a 50i standard definition. Don't really want a 25p standard definition, but I want a 50i one. So again, what you're doing is you're choosing the size, you're choosing the frame rate, whether it's interlaced or not, I for interlaced, P for progressive. Those are the ones that I would generally choose myself in PAL land, where I am in the UK. And then I'll click completed, and there we are. You've now got your new project dialog box with a list of different project settings that you can use. You notice the project is defaulting to being made in that folder that I chose when we first started off. I'm just going to give it a name, and then I'm just going to choose a setting. Now, I do go at great length in my tutorial about what project setting you should choose and when. The most important thing to know when you're choosing a project setting is that although you can change a lot of things later, you can't change the basic frame rate. So if I started a 50p project, I can't change it to a 25p project. It's the same if I started like an NTSC one or a 30 frames a second project, I can't change that to a 50 frames a second project. That's the main thing you've got to get right. The rest of it you can change afterwards. I'm going to go for 1920 at 25p, which happens to be what I do edit a lot of stuff at these days, because I'm filming on a camera that films at 25p. That is actually not a format that I can output to a Blu-ray disc, but I can always swap it from 25p to 50i. Now you might think, hang on, you're changing the frame rate there because that says 25 and that says 50. 50i is actually 25 frames a second. They just split up into 2 interlaced halves. In some ways maybe they should call that 25i and that 25p, and then you'd know they're exactly the same. Choose a setting, click OK, then you're into Edius. That project setting will have set up most of the common settings of the project, but you might want to change things about it. Now you can do that, and also you can make up new project settings by coming to the Settings heading, going to System, Application, Project Preset, and here you can see all those different project settings, and you can select one, click on Modify, and then you can change stuff about it. And personally in these settings here, I like to get rid of the overscan size, which automatically chops a few pixels off the edge when you do an effect on a clip. That can sometimes be annoying if you're producing a video where people can see the whole thing, so I like to put that to nothing. I also like to change the resampling method here to Lanczos. Tend to go for Lanczos 3 high quality. Most of the other stuff I'll leave as it is, but those are the two things I generally change, the overscan size and the resampling method. And of course, if I want to, I'd have to go through and change that on all of them, but at least I got all the rest of it right, all this stuff. Set up with the right number of audio channels, bit depth and everything else. Now once you get to know a bit more about Edius, you might want to do some different presets. Very easily what you can do, as you can see here, it's all pretty straightforward. You can take one, copy it, choose that one, modify it, change everything else about it. I could change that to a 30 frames a second project. And let's change the name to 30p. I could make an 8-bit one instead if I wanted to. And now I've got a different project preset in there for 1920-30. You can also run that wizard again just by clicking on the preset wizard button. Or you can make up a new preset from scratch. But that's the first thing you have to do when you get into Edius, make up some basic project settings. On my computer, I like to have those project settings divided up into separate folders. And you can do that by going to where Edius stores its basic settings and changing stuff there. So if I go to Programs, Users, name of the user, that's me, App Data, Roaming, Grass Valley, Edius 9, because I'm in Edius 9. Here you've actually got a folder full of project presets. These are all those individual presets that you've just made up. And what you can do, you can make up a folder, like one that says 1920 HD, one that says UHD, and so on. And then you can drag the settings into those folders. Now when you make up a new project in Edius, you'll notice I've got folders there. Some of them have got things in and some of them haven't. The UHD one has got 2 settings that I've dragged in there. What you'll notice though is that these presets just are called preset. I dragged 2 into the UHD folder and yep, one of them happened to be UHD, the other one wasn't, because to be honest I don't know which is which. So the way you get them into folders is by dragging them in to a particular folder. Yep, I got preset 4 in there, and then looking at it, seeing if it's the right thing, if not, moving it somewhere else. It's a bit hit and miss if you want to set them up as folders like that. Now I do that all the time because I find it's easier to organise the list, but it doesn't make any major difference, it's still exactly the same settings. Now I've made up a bunch of project presets and put them in folders. You can download this from my website if you like, and rather than going through that project wizard, you can just delete all the stuff in there, grab hold of these things, drag them and copy them into that folder. And then you'll have a set of pre-made settings in little folders which are using the settings I use all the time. So you don't have to use my settings, you can quite happily use your own or just the ones that Edius has made up. So that's it, I've made up some project presets, I've got into Edius and I'm ready to go. What else should I change?